This week has been all about reinforcements. Reinforcements in the form of the building team and reinforcement of the ground floor walls where I've been lowering the floor. It's been a busy week and I've had some nervous moments. This is what we've been up to. The building team were due to start their work on the second day of the week, but to come here on the first day and drop off some materials about midday. So I had a bit of time to do some tidying up and finishing off the clearing up in the open plan area that I started last week. First up, I had to clear out some general rubbish. Then I had to move the scaffolding and props to a temporary storage spot outside. After my drinks break, it was time to move the shelves, desk and tools out of the way. After a bit of deliberation, I decided upstairs was better than the shed for these and my new temporary office. Next, I opened up the rooms in case the team needed to see them that day to understand the work, and also to remember how they looked before the work started. And I had just about finished when the team arrived. After a quick catch-up with Alma and Haggy, they quickly unloaded their tools and materials. After the drop-off by the team, it was time for some lunch. Finishing with a quick check of the live score from an exciting cricket match back in England. Then I had to fill up the bidons left by the team with water from the well, so that they had a water store in place for when the work started. And while the bidons were filling up, I moved some of the last rocks that I had previously left on the floor. With a bit of time left over, I lifted out some of the old pavers from the area that I had cleared earlier that morning. These were quite a bit bigger and thicker than I had anticipated, and I thought it was better to leave it for the team to move them rather than overstrain my elbow trying to lift them out. The team for this phase of work is slightly different to the last group, although I am happy to say that Alma is back. And because a couple of the team would rather not feature too much in this week's video, I hope to be able to make a better introduction to all of them later on. Once they had unloaded and set up their stuff, things started to happen pretty quickly. I'm sorry if you're struggling to follow what's going on, but that's kind of how I felt at the time. But essentially the team's boss was on site and they were digging into various walls and floors to check just how strong the bedrock was. And at this stage, their initial thoughts were that the bedrock was looking pretty strong and that therefore it was okay to dig right up to the edge of the walls. At this stage, a big load of materials arrived, and not long afterwards the architect and technical architect arrived to review the work plans. And while I was talking to them, I wasn't able to follow everything that was happening. Once the new materials had been covered up, the team split into two groups to work across the first two rooms. They were clearing rocks up to the walls. With 2 and sometimes 3 wheelbarrows being used, there was a lot of action on the rock pile, and I could see that sooner rather than later the surface was going to need to be a bit clearer. So rather than get in the team's way, I thought I would get on with that. With the team now doing the same digging and picking up work as I had done previously, I was interested to see their technique. And to start with, I thought it was better to keep my mouth shut and let them get on with it. But later on, I decided to be a bit more proactive on this. I had thought that the team would be cutting away the rock with a grinder or another tool to minimize the impact on the rock and the structure of the walls. And when they were using these smaller power hammers with long chisels, I was initially pretty worried. But they were confident that it wouldn't be a problem and that it would be faster and much less dusty. And after a while, I became a little bit more relaxed about the approach. Towards the end of the day, I was still trying to stay out of the way of the team, and while I waited for the last bit of work to finish, I stayed in the salon, followed the cricket score, and enjoyed the view. The next day, the teams were straight back into their digging work, and I introduced them to the wooden board to help with the shoveling. I think it's fair to say that they thought it was a good idea and made things much easier. When the team had cleared some of the rock against this wall, we could see the remains of yet another root from the old lime tree I took out months ago. I resolved to try and get it out by chiseling through it and trying to push it out, but I wasn't having much luck. With the guys on a break and the generator off, I thought now was a good time to try and explain the work we're doing with a couple of drawings. First of all, this is how things looked before I did any work, with the walls built with stones on top of the bedrock. And for the work that I've already done, I've essentially taken out 90 centimeters of rock from the original floor level, but I've left about 50 centimeters of rock up against the wall to avoid any problems before the work we're doing now. And now, after the team's initial checks of the walls and bedrock, both the builders and architects are pretty confident in the strength and support of the bedrock. So for the external walls, we will only be removing rock in front of the wall and not taking away any rock underneath the walls. And for these walls, the teams are removing 50 centimeters of rock from below the old floor line, and then just enough rock away from the wall into the center of the room so that they can put formwork in place. And once the rock has been cleared, they will then be adding concrete reinforced with steel bars to the front of the wall with a width of 11 centimeters and a height of 50 centimeters. And to add the concrete, they first have to set up the formwork boards and props. And later on, when the concrete is set, they will remove the remaining rock in the center of the room that is above the target level, but they will leave a step of about 45 centimeters below the concrete to keep the wall strong. And finally, when all the reinforcing work is complete, the modern flooring solutions can start to be added into the center, which at the end of this stage will just be the layers of gravel, an impermeable membrane, and some concrete. For the internal walls, the solution will be slightly different and will involve putting concrete both in front of and under the wall with a total width of 20 centimeters. And once the first side of concrete is set, they will then repeat the work on the other side so that the internal walls are fully propped and supported by concrete on both sides. So I hope those drawings were helpful, and I might refer back to them at various stages during the work while it's going on. But just to confirm, for the external walls, it's a 10 centimeter concrete structure, and for the internals, it's 20 on both sides. And we'll be working our way around the different rooms in different phases, essentially doing L shapes of concrete structure. With the first wall that we wanted to work on now fully cleared, the team started to put some initial bricks in place to hold the formwork. And then, because this is an internal wall, they started to chip away about 10 centimeters under the wall. This was another nervous moment for me, but the team's confidence was slightly reassuring. And with the formwork almost ready, it was time to start getting the concrete ready and to insert the metal reinforcements in the cavity. With the work being near the door, I had to work out where best to watch from, and I wasn't always successful. And with the uneven surface in the room, it wasn't easy for the team to work in the room either. And they were having to lift the concrete into the cavity carefully by hand. After a while, the timing of the concrete delivery got smoother, and the team were able to quickly work their way across the wall. And with all the necessary concrete in, the team leader applied some finishing touches. And then left the concrete to set overnight. The next day it was time to check out how the concrete had set and to remove the formwork. I think we were all pretty pleased with the initial result, and while two of the digging team continued in one of the next rooms, the formwork team got on with preparations for the next section of wall. While I was watching the team set up the steel reinforcement, I reminded myself of why we were doing this work. First of all, remembering how low the corners of the ceilings were before. And then, looking at the space created by lowering the floor. With the formwork ready, it was time for the final preparations. Having watched the work on the first wall, I had a slightly better idea of the process that they were going to follow this time, and where I might be able to watch from and help where possible. The biggest difficulty for the work was the narrow entrance to the room, especially getting the concrete in quickly from the two wheelbarrows. So for some parts of this work, I was able to lend a bit of a hand. As the team progressed across the wall, it was becoming more difficult for the two leads to pass and pour the concrete. So with the supply lines stretched, I volunteered to plug the gap. With the concrete poured, there was a bit of tidying up, and then the team carried on with rock removing. In the corner of this room, there was some extra chipping out for a future bathroom drain from above.
Oi,
Bom dia.
bom dia.
On the last day of the week, after some initial setting up, the digging team got straight into action. While the formwork team checked the concrete from the day before and started to move the formwork to the next room. After a bit of tidying up, the team were happy with the results. And they moved on to the next room, including work on the drain pipe. Having watched the process in full the day before, this time I opted for more occasional check-ins on the work. After a lot of work setting up the formwork, the team were ready for the next concrete phase, with the digging team changing jobs and helping out with the concrete delivery process. With the last section of concrete smoothed over, the team split back out, some for cleaning and tidying up, while the others continued work for the next room. In time for an inspection from the team's boss Enric and the technical architect Tony.
Lo controlo, pero no.
¿Trabajará este fin de semana?
Sí, trabajará, pero no controla. Hay muchas chicas por allí, se mira mucho allí.
No este tipo de trabajar. And that is the end of a busy week of work. This space is back to being full of stuff, despite my earlier tidy up. And there have been a few bits of rock and bits of stone removed from this space. But the main action today has been in here, where the concrete on the back wall is currently setting, including around the drain pipe that we put in there. While this middle room has been walked through a lot, especially by the digging team working in here, where they've made good progress clearing 2 of the walls, added some metal, and have it ready for formwork and concrete at the start of next week. And then in this room, we've got 2 reinforced walls, which give a pretty good idea of how all of these rooms are going to look at the end of this phase of work. And while there are still a lot of walls that we need to clear the rock from, I think the team have made a pretty good start to the work. And despite making me nervous at various moments during the work, they seem to be pretty confident with the strength of the bedrock and the process that they're following. So we'll push on and hopefully be able to pick up the pace a bit, and you can tune in next week to see how we get on.